Hello, I'm Freeman Hrabowski, president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. I get goosebumps doing math. I often start with that, and sometimes it shocks people. But I begin with a story about my childhood, because each of us is a product of our childhood experiences. I grew up in the Deep South, in Birmingham, Alabama, and as a child, my parents would take me to hear speakers from different places in our church. And I was invited to an event on the middle of the week. I didn't want to go. My parents insisted. I went and I listened to this gentleman who said, if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our young people know the difference between right and wrong, and our kids will be able to go to better schools. And all of a sudden I looked up, because I was always bothered that in our schools that had some wonderful teachers, they were all black schools, wonderful teachers, we didn't have the resources, and often we had to use hand-me-down books from the white schools, and that was not a good feeling. And so I said, who is that guy? And someone said, that's Dr. Martin Luther King. And I was fascinated, because what he said essentially was that tomorrow can be better than today. You don't always have to go to school where they give you hand-me-down books. And used books. And I went home and told my parents I wanted to participate in this peaceful demonstration. At first they said no, then they allowed me to go the next day, and I did. I spent a week in jail with other kids who wanted a better education. Well, interestingly, as I was listening to Dr. King, I was doing the two things that I love most, eating food and mathematics. And I was doing my algebra. I was 12, and I was doing this algebra. And I always associate mathematics and word problems with civil rights and the idea of the right of all of us to be able to think well and to think critically. And so I've spent my life finding ways to increase the number of students who love math and science and engineering and who want to become scientists or researchers or engineers or physicians. I had the privilege of chairing the National Academy of Sciences report on underrepresentation in STEM, particularly for people of color, African Americans, Latinos, other groups. And most important, that was 10 years ago. And I looked at the results of that study, and in that 10-year period, 10 years ago, we could say that 2.2% of the PhDs awarded in the natural sciences and engineering were going to African Americans, as an example. 2.2% 10 years ago. Today, it's gone from the 2.2% to 2.3%. The point being, we have not moved the needle. And that's what I want to talk about. How do we move the needle? How do we increase the number of students of color and students in general who succeed in science, women in computer science, African Americans, Latinos, and others? We find that the majority of students who are interested in science will leave it at different points. And we know we need to work on pre-K through 12 and strengthening there. We've got programs at UMBC, such as the Meyerhoff Scholars program, designed to increase the number of teachers of all races who will work with children of all races, but in challenging schools. And then looking at the other parts of that continuum, what our report showed that was that while it may be the case that we have to do much more in the pre-K through 12, the place where we could really move the needle would be at the undergrad level. We know we have to do more at the graduate level. We need more PhDs because we need more people on the faculties of our institutions. Very few universities can talk about having more than one or two people of color in chemistry, as an example, in physics. And so we focused a great deal of attention in that report on things we could do to change the culture of science at the undergraduate level. All of you know that we call the first 2 years of science weed-out courses. We should be doing all we can to help students at the high school level and before, middle school, and before that, to do well in math and reading skills and in science. And the challenge we face is that even when those students are well prepared and they come to college, many don't succeed. In fact, the study that we chaired showed that it wasn't surprising to us that only 20% of students of color, Black, Latino, and even smaller numbers for Native Americans who begin with a major in science, will graduate in science or engineering, natural sciences and engineering. But for whites, it's only about 32%. And for Asians, it's only 41%. So literally 2/3 of all students leave science within the first 2 years. And the challenge we face is that we need more people participating in science. We need to be broadening participation in science and engineering so that people will trust that work. No time has been more critical for us to look for people of all backgrounds than now as we deal with challenges of COVID. It's been more important than ever. And so our TED Talk, the TED Talk that my colleagues and I worked on and that I give, focuses on the 4 pillars of success in science. What is it we need to do? I want to talk about that and then about the Meyerhoff program. Those 4 pillars, the pillars are, number 1, high expectations. Number 2, building community among students. Number 3, really important, it takes people in science to pull other people into that work. And number 4, we need rigorous evaluation. When we talk about high expectations, it's not just high expectations of the students. We know we want to encourage the students to work hard and to learn how to work in groups, for example, to learn how to ask good questions. But high expectations of us as faculty members, as people who work with those students, to say, what else can we do to help students succeed? That means everything from knowing what's the background one must have to have a reasonable chance of succeeding in a course in calculus or in a course in first-year chemistry. Secondly, the idea that if we can get students to work together in groups, to learn how to problem solve, to work with each other, to interact, we can help many more students succeed. And third, it really does take getting into labs to make a difference. If you want to help a student succeed who can go on and become a PhD in science or decide to go to med school, we have to do 2 things. 1, help that student do well in those first 2 years of the college experience, because that's when you set the foundation. If students can get at least B's, they've got a strong foundation, they can move on. And then getting them into labs as early as possible. In the Baltimore-Washington corridor, many of our students actually work in labs at NIH and other places, other national agencies, while in high school. So when they come, they know they have good hands, but they need as many experiences as possible. And then finally, how do we give the kind of rigorous evaluation, looking at the analytics, what the trends will tell us, but then focus groups to understand what students are saying. We began the Meyerhoff program about 30 years, a little over 30 years ago. And amazingly, we now have become, UMBC is the #1 producer of African Americans who, at the bachelor's level, who go on to complete PhDs in natural sciences and engineering. And the list has 10 institutions. The institutions that are not HBCUs are UMBC and College Park, University of Maryland College Park, and University of Florida. And then a number of HBCUs with North Carolina A&T, and then you have Spelman and Xavier, and Morgan State and Jackson State. And on that list, and in the numbers 11 and 12 spots, would be my alma mater, Hampton. Of course, Morehouse is on that list also. So those are the schools. When we talk about predominantly white schools, we find that we have to go down the list some. I think number 15 is MIT, actually. And there are some others on that list. But the top 10 really are some of those HBCUs. UMBC, which is not an HBCU, we have students from 100 countries. About 20% of our students are Black. But the Meyerhoff program has been designed to help students of color and then others to excel, not just make it through, but to excel. And we do that, and I invite you to look at the 60 Minutes piece on the Meyerhoff program in UMBC. It's only 15 minutes. You'll probably find most stunning the fact that we take the phones from the students in the summertime, that first summer during the week, so they can focus on each other. They work in groups. They learn a lot about problem solving. They come to appreciate each other and the need to help each other. And they have a vision of becoming a leader in science. And the Meyerhoff program has large numbers. We've had about 1,000 graduates at this point, and I'll talk about a couple at the end. But we would say to you, as you think about universities or school systems, we have to think about ways of changing the culture. That's the point. Our most recent book, my colleagues and I have a new book out entitled The Empowered University. And the message is empowered to do what? Empowered to look in the mirror at self and to appreciate one's strengths, but to be honest about ways in which we need to improve. That's whether it's a university or a school system or for a person. And there's several things I would say. The culture of the environment is critical. It was Eric Weiner who wrote the book, The Geography of Bliss, that says culture is the sea we swim in, so all-consuming that we fail to recognize it until we step out of it and look back at it. It's like looking in the mirror at self. And there are several points. Number one, do we know who is succeeding? Number two, are we listening to the voices of students as we think through what we need to do to help more students succeed? Have we analyzed the backgrounds, the math background, the science background, the study habits, the attitudes, to understand what traits would be most significant? And most important, are we engaging faculty and staff in that process? So that if most students are not succeeding, we don't think it's just the students. We talk about what else can we do to make a difference. So the Meyerhoff program has done so well. It's now being replicated at several places, including Penn State and Chapel Hill, with funding from the Howard Hughes Medical Institutions. And it's now also being replicated at Berkeley and San Diego with funding from Chan Zuckerberg. And also at Howard University with the Meyerhoff Scholars. Now, what's significant about this? It is that what we're doing with Meyerhoff can be replicated to focus on building that group of students with some faculty and staff members who really care about the students, but who get into the specifics of why someone is not doing well in chemistry. Or if someone is doing poorly, whether or not we need to think about intervention of different types. I would tell you this as an example. If a student earns a C in the first year of chemistry, it's very unlikely that student's going to do well in the second year of chemistry. I can tell you that while large numbers of our students may have fours and fives on AP chemistry, we still believe they need to start with the first year because the AP work is very solid, but it's more formulaic. And in the college calculus courses, in the college chemistry courses, you may have some problems that have been seen before, others you will not have seen before. And what we found was that students with the AP fours and fives were still in the next level not making A's, often not B's. And so we've helped them understand the need to have a solid foundation before moving on. And so I want you to think about why we're doing this work finally. During COVID, we know that many people have been unwilling to take the vaccine. I was very pleased when our graduate, a Meyerhoff Scholar, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, said to me that she had been leading the team at NIH that had developed that mRNA technology and had partnered with Moderna, but that's also, you can find that technology in Pfizer. And what's amazing is that, as Dr. Fauci has said, Dr. Corbett, who was working with and under Dr. Barney Graham, but Dr. Corbett led the team. And so she becomes the first Black woman in the world to create a vaccine. There's something about that should give us all goosebumps. Because as I've seen little girls hearing her talk of all races and young women, all of a sudden they're saying, maybe this is something I can do. And so when we think about moving the needle, it is taking us from where we are today to a place where we do see girls and young women aspiring to create a vaccine, and young men of color being successful in what they do. The last Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams, is at UMBC Meyerhoff also. He had never seen a Black doctor in his small town in Maryland until he came to college. And yet he went on to be the nation's Surgeon General, and with degrees from Indiana and Berkeley. And finally, one of the new Howard Hughes Medical Institution's investigators, HHMI investigators. These are the lead scientists you can find anywhere. He is black. There are two of them that are black in this group, but the percent of black HHMI graduates, Institute investigators, let me say that again. You should know that of the 1,000 or so HHMI investigators, well under 1%, under 1/10 of 1% are black. So one of our graduates just became an HHMI investigator. But listen at the work he does. He is a neuroscientist, a tenured faculty member at Duke, and he studies the role of a pacemaker he has invented in addressing schizophrenia and bipolar disease. Fascinating work. What is my point? We need all the talent we can get. We need to believe that these students can do it. We need to show them the skills they need, the habits of mind, the curiosity. It was I. Robbie who said, when he was growing up in New York, all of his friends' parents, and particularly their mothers, would say, "What'd you learn in school today?" He said, "Not my mother." My mother would say, "Izzy, did you ask a good question today?" And that practice of encouraging his curiosity made him the thinker he became. And he went on to win the Nobel Prize in Physics. We want to encourage not just our students, but our colleagues to ask good questions as we figure out how do we move the needle. You know, I started by talking about being a little kid in Birmingham, doing my math, never knowing what it would mean to be in a classroom with people different from myself, of a different race, and not believing that I would ever be good enough to have my own new books. And yet, all things are possible if we work together towards social justice, if we understand that all of what we're talking about in science and math and engineering, that all of this is connected to what we do in our society and how we envision the possibilities for all of our children. We want our kids, we want our colleagues to know we cannot waste human talent, that we need the help of all of these people. And so I often will say to people as they get that vaccine, when you get that vaccine, think about my student and just say, "Thank you, UMBC." But imagine the next little girl who grows up to create a vaccine. And with that, I challenge you with these words. I challenge you to watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny, dreams, and values. Thank you.